How much do you earn? I remember asking that question to someone and they're like, we don't do that around here, Wangari. Yep, salary and pay transparency, a big taboo. We're never meant to talk about it. You're never meant to know how much someone earns. Just stick with your salary and never talk about it. And that's what we're discussing today. It is one of the biggest trends in people. And I'm a big believer if we have pay and salary transparency, we're going to bring pay equity into the workplace. So I'm really excited with the guest I have today. I'll just switch over so that she can do a quick intro of herself.
Thank you. My name is Persis Ashers. I'm an ops and people professional and someone who believes that human capital is the greatest asset for any organization. My day and sometimes night job is as COO for the Innovation Village. The Innovation Village is an entrepreneurship ecosystem that convenes entrepreneurs, creatives, and everybody else in the ecosystem towards enabling innovation, powering tech solutions, and just ensuring that the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Africa is thriving, and it's providing solutions for all of us. I'm also an aspiring restaurant owner. I'm a lover of people, of culture, and of just seeing everybody thrive, whatever that means. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Africa Ops. I think the term ops, when did it start? Especially people ops. That's a whole new trend. When was that? When did that even actually start?
Man, I have no idea. But I think it's a cool term.
Yeah.
But I've also had of different terms as well. There's ops stars.
Oh,
There's,
cool.
I guess, just different ways that people play around with the word operations.
Yeah.
And so ops just sounds easy and rolls off the tongue and allows us to get work done.
Awesome.
Whenever we need to.
Cool. We'll go right into the topic. What is salary transparency or pay transparency?
That's a good one. So just allow me to look at my notes because I want to get it right. Since it's such a sensitive topic, I know anything to do with salary, to do with pay.
Yes.
It's about livelihoods. It's about culture. It's very close to our hearts.
Yeah.
And so a description that I got when I just did a bit of reading on this is that it's an intentionality by companies about or around the compensation provided for current and prospective employees, often as a step towards pay equity.
Okay.
Yeah. So equity is also in there. So
awesome.
We need to be very careful about how we define it.
Okay, cool. I really love it, and I'm glad there's pay equity in there because, even me as someone who's not in people, I always feel like it's important to have this transparency because that's one of the biggest things it brings around equity. I remember I ran a poll just in preparation for this interview, and I asked on LinkedIn, how many of you would be happy to have pay transparency or salary transparency in your organizations? So a large majority were keen. They said yes. And there were of course, a few who said no. And when I dug deep into why did you say no, it's around ignorance is bliss. I'd rather not know because there'll always be someone who's going to be paid more than me. Let me just these things, I don't want them to be known. Do you think it's a positive thing for employees to know?
Yeah, well, I don't know whether there's anybody who would not want to know, how much everybody earns.
Yeah.
There's two sayings that I really like. I can't remember who's, said each of them, but one is salary is like weight. Mm-hmm. We can always ballpark it.
Yes.
The second one is that salary is like mental health. Of course, mental health is a lot serious, but salary is like what mental health was maybe 30 years back.
Yeah.
It's inevitable that we'll get to a point where we talk about it on the daily.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Yeah, those are really two good sayings.
So do employees care about it? Definitely.
They care about it.
Do companies care about it? That's, I guess you have to then unpack what that means.
Yeah. I guess let's unpack. We'll start from the employers. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't they want salary and pay transparency in the organization?
I think first, pay secrecy has been a norm across most organizations. And so companies have really benefited from keeping that under wraps and, paying people whatever they deem, which has allowed structures to not be built within organizations, which has allowed people or talent teams to not put as much thinking and, utilize the data they have towards building structures for equity. But I also think over and above that, it's a Pandora's box.
Okay.
It's opening, taking us into their bedrooms, taking us into their back spaces, and allowing us to just see how chaotic, some of this work can look like. So I think there's maybe some hesitancy for many organizations around just opening their gates and allowing us to see what it actually looks like.
Yeah. Okay. So it's mainly around hesitance. And on the employee side, what do you think is the kind of the root cause of around why they don't? I know those, as I said, ignorance is bliss. Are there any other underlying issues or things that you may know why they?
I think so. Thinking about just African culture, and this is like just being very broad. There's a lot of confidentiality around certain things, money being one of those.
Yeah.
And just like what you actually have. And so I would understand why many organizations or even many individuals would never want to actually give you the Kenya shillings or the dollar amount, on their paycheck.
Yeah.
I also think that outside of that, it has been a trend. Contracts have a clause around not sharing your salary with other people.
Yeah.
And so officially or formally, we never talk about salary.
Yeah.
But the reality is everybody's talking about salary all the time.
Yeah.
And in informal conversations, in speaking to people in another organization, as you apply to a new role,
yes,
salary is always a conversation.
That is a very interesting one when you say when you're moving into a new role. I remember the first time I realized Kenyans are a bit funny about salary is when I was moving back to Kenya. So I was living in Australia and I was moving back to Kenya and it was my first job here. And not knowing like on ballpark, how much do you earn? Hey, I was told no, like just let me know how much I should earn. I think one of my friends even like lied to me how much they earn. So then I kind of used that like as a baseline. And I was just like, wow, this is like very, very interesting. Because if we shared this information, I didn't kind of know where to put myself, like what to negotiate from, like versus just going in blind into these conversations. But I like that. Very
it's a
interesting
taboo topic. Even for like my best friends or like the people that are very close to me, if I'm going to be speaking to them about salary, I have to like find the best time. Think about how I'm going to actually ask that question. You don't just like come up and ask how much you earn. Someone will think you're crazy. So you have to like phrase it with, why am I asking this? This particular question. And maybe they might even justify it by talking about some of the loans that they have, so that you don't think that the salary is not equivalent to maybe the car that they have, the house that they own. So there's always, I think there's just like some cultural aspects that we need to think about anytime we talk about salary and transparency.
Awesome, cool. So the world is changing. Like right now, especially the workplace, we are working in a very global organization for most people. Like you have people who are based in Africa, some people are based in like the United States, Canada, it's all over like the world.
Yeah.
And one question that I often like wonder is, how should you address like salary transparency? And I think I'm coming in from like, especially the tech space where, an engineer from Kenya is touching the same code base as an engineer from the Bay Area.
Yeah.
How should we deal with that situation?
I think with the direction that the future of work is taking, conversations around pay transparency once again are inevitable.
Yeah.
There's legislation in so many lands already around the need for companies to actually just come out as they're trying to recruit and communicate how much they're paying for certain roles, whether a band or whether an actual figure. But this information is required by law.
By law, yeah.
And so if you're hiring from some of these countries,
you have to.
You must.
Yeah.
And so if that's happening, how do you then justify that you're going to do it for the US or for Canada or for Europe,
but not do it for Kenya?
Not do it for Africa.
Yeah, not do it for Kenya or Africa.
So I think HR professionals really need to think about their pay philosophies and how they can actually ensure equity. And ensuring equity is across, is within different processes, actually calls for transparency.
Yeah.
And being very open about, what are your team members looking for? What do you need to attract? What do you need to retain? And additionally, how does this pay philosophy fit within your business objectives?
Yeah.
And because that also matters. It's not about just like matching it to what's in the US or matching it to another country.
Yeah.
But you need to also map it to how much money you guys are making, how much money you're actually able to pay and pay sustainably.
Yeah.
So that you're not able to pay an amazing team a certain amount for a year and then you can't afford to pay them anymore. And then they have to leave.
Yeah. And what's your take on, I know there's like location-based versus just paying people based on their experience and their merits versus using a location too. Because I can decide to go live in Monaco and I'd expect to be paid like more than the person like in Kenya. Well, what are your thoughts around those current trends?
I think, okay, first thinking about trends. We are now hiring a lot of younger professionals than previously, and they're coming in with experience and the know-how. A lot of them are taught by the University of YouTube at times, so they're like pretty fast. They're good at what they do. They're adventurous. They're innovative. All the things that most organizations need. So thinking about just this specific group and their views or perceptions around transparency, openness, all these things that touch on pay transparency. You need to think about how to attract them, how to keep them, how to have those conversations continuously, and how the people or the HR team does not continue to feel like they are the authority and they know what everybody needs. But rather, having that team or that department be a team that's open to feedback, open to engaging, open to co-creating, with this group of professionals. I think additionally, thinking about just trends. Each organization needs to think about what the best structure for them is.
Okay.
So I've worked for an organization that was fully remote. And so it meant that you could work from anywhere that you wanted to be based in. Yeah. But then that means that the people team needs to then go back and think about, with regards to legislation, what does this mean? Yeah. There are some organizations that allow you to take care of your taxes. And there are some countries that actually ensure that they have structures around people paying taxes. And so these taxes would be different in one country versus another. So all these different aspects need to really be thought out carefully. So while the organization might be maybe thinking about just the gross amount that you earn, someone else maybe is looking at the net amount. So how does that compare, with someone living in Kenya? How does that compare with regards to living standards? All these different things need to be really taken into account to ensure equity, not just on paper, but actually in the way that people live and people experience our processes.
All right, cool. So let's say we have an organization and you want to transition into like a very pay transparent, salary transparent organization.
Yeah.
What steps would you take to get there?
Oh man. So I've been in employment and entrepreneurship for about 12 years. In the last 3 years, maybe 3.5, is when I've seen conversations around pay structures and pay philosophies. Yeah. Which is crazy because I think maybe because I was like pretty early on in my career before then, or just because this information was not publicly available, there was never a need for the organizations I worked for to come out with this information and just like help us understand what they think about when they're talking about pay. Yeah. So it means I've been promoted throughout my career without having a clue, why are these guys paying me this amount? How does this fit in with like people at the same level? Perceived or not,
how much do your manager
how much does my manager earn? Do I want to be in that role?
Is it worth it? That's exactly, those are the questions.
It's crazy. It's so, there's so much secrecy around, there has been. But I think the future of work is just now moving towards a direction where there has to be transparency. So if an organization is thinking about pay transparency, I think first all organizations should be thinking about it. There's no way around it. But I think a pay philosophy is key. Okay. Who's in our team? What competencies do they have? Why do we pay them the amount we pay them? Yeah. So getting to understand the data that organizations already have internally, and then thinking about what space are we operating in? Yeah. What are other players paying? Yeah. If we really care about retention, we need to understand considerations being made around salary. So you're not, training people, attracting the best, training them, and then a year later they're gone. Yeah. Additionally, I think, so thinking about internal data that we have, what that tells us, thinking about data from, other organizations and benchmarking ourselves, within those structures. And then after that, just thinking about the stakeholders that we have within our system.
Yeah.
And what actually matters to them, and ensuring that structures that we have really address the objectives that each of them have in mind. After that, I think a big one would be training managers.
Training the managers. Okay.
We've had many conversations. Many professionals have had a pay conversation with the manager, and it's always clear that the manager does not know why this particular salary is being tagged to you. So you're getting a promotion. I need 10% more, or I'm looking for 10% more.
Yeah.
And they say no, but there's no actual rationale behind why that's happening. So I think training your senior leaders, training your leaders to just think about how to communicate that, and to really understand what the pay structure looks like, so that they can articulate it in a way that makes sense.
Okay.
I think is another big one. And then outside of that, thinking about communicating to the team, whether internal or communicating to potential team members would be key.
Yeah.
Lastly, it's not a one-off activity.
Interesting.
And so you need to just think about reviewing these structures every so often. Some organizations do it every 2 years.
Okay. Yeah.
But it needs to be well documented so that you can continue making iterations if there's need for that. There'll of course be need for that, but to continue just reviewing these processes regularly.
Awesome. Cool. I love that. You touched on something there where you're collecting the data and benchmarking. How do you do that if organizations are already very hesitant to give you this data? They're hesitant to give you the data around how much they're paying their staff.
Yeah.
How would you go about it, or even just asking or?
Okay, first, don't ask your best friends only. I think there's just a movement around knowledge sharing and not being too closed up.
Yeah.
If you speak to many HR professionals, man, they're in the trenches. They're ready to share. They're ready to engage. And that's why we started the Africa Ops community.
Yeah.
To bring ops professionals together to just problem solve, share, what they're reading, who they're speaking to, some of these, ideas that would help us build strong organizations. But outside of that, there's also organizations that help you gather this data. They've done the research, and so you need to hire them.
Yeah.
And they can help you benchmark yourself against, different organizations and within your sector. I think that's very important. But just building connections with other professionals who are solving the same problems would help you, solve for that.
Solve for that.
Of course, with confidentiality clauses in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Another question just on this pay that's kind of popped up. Often, sometimes when you're interviewing and you're at the final stage of the interview, and sometimes organizations will ask you, what are you currently earning?
Yeah.
And sometimes they use that as a benchmark to either, give you more and to attract you in. What are your thoughts around that? Should I actually even be sharing how much I'm earning at this point, or should I just tell them, hey, just give me what you have budgeted for this role, give me the salary band, and what are your thoughts around that?
So I'm laughing, but I actually think that's what should be happening.
Yeah.
Why is pay such a secret?
Yeah.
If you go to the shop to purchase something, you will know what the price is, and you will give the money and get, So this is a transaction.
Yeah.
That's happening where you're giving certain skills and time and your effort towards something, and in exchange, you should get something that's equivalent.
Yeah.
Equivalent being, I guess, not as objective as we'd like, but there's an exchange happening.
Yes.
So there's never a company that's existed that has tried to hire without knowing whether they have the money for it or not.
Exactly.
You definitely know you have funds to put towards a particular role.
And you budgeted
and
a certain amount.
And you know how much you have, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is just still around that culture of being very closed up and very, scared and fearful of the unknown. Yeah. I think there's really nothing wrong with asking, what range are you guys looking at?
Yeah.
What amount have you put aside for this particular role?
Awesome.
The company should be able then to share what considerations they have. Maybe it's, we're looking for someone with this amount of local context, and so we would gauge that alongside maybe managerial experience, maybe, alongside level of education and this and this and this and this and that. There's nothing wrong with asking a HR professional.
Okay. What about if they lie to you?
Is that the company you want to join?
No, but you find out later
that they lied.
That they've lied.
Then you need to have a conversation.
You need to have a conversation.
One thing HR people don't tell you about is that a lot of their time HR people, operations, and many managers, a lot of their time is spent speaking to people who are upset about salary. So these conversations are happening a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, pay transparency is a good thing, because it means this amounts of time that's, being spent on these conversations without a clear direction for many managers can actually be reduced. So you come in knowing how much you're likely to earn if you get the role, how much people within, this level of experience or within this role, are earning, what growth looks like, how much you'll earn if you work hard and move on to the next role. Clarity, transparency is a good thing.
Awesome.
I think just the structures around getting there are what many organizations need to think about.
Okay, so if they've because I always have this feeling like when I'm talking, especially traditional human resources people, I think their one job is to try get you to as the cheapest as possible. Yeah. But then soon enough,
sounds so bad.
Yeah, no, but seriously, they're like, this person, let me try get them as cheap labor to some sort. And I think, especially in Kenya, that is usually the trend I have noticed. So I guess when that happens is to have that conversation, if you ever do find out with them and be like, I think have the conversation. The other thing is, you don't have to be in one company forever. Correct.
So once you recognize that there are certain things that you are not for or are not aligned with your values, then you can find another role.
Something else.
If I guess it's also a privilege, but if you can do that, then that's an option. But HR people are constantly talking about pay. Do not feel shy about reaching out to them and having a conversation around pay.
That's good to know. So I guess now just going into a scenario where I was in an organization where there was no pay transparency. They've gone through the steps. Now we have very transparent salary bands, how much this person is on, and it's very clear. And then I get kind of surprised because there's always that feeling, how is this person earning a little more than me? What we kind of are doing the same. What do you suggest that they do? I guess have that conversation. Is there anything else you suggest they do if it happens? And then you're just like, well, this doesn't feel right. There's a discrepancy somewhere.
I think having a conversation is definitely one, but also just understanding what your value is.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, when I was living my most previous role, and just interviewing with different organizations and thinking about what I'm looking for, comp-wise and. I went on Glassdoor.
Oh, yes.
And they gave me a figure that, I guess they came up with it based on a lot of other considerations, but they were we think you should, be on this amount for your next role. Or this is how much your skills are worth.
Yeah.
It was very close to what I was on.
Yeah.
And very within the band of what I was looking for.
Awesome.
And so there's a lot of platforms where you can get that information.
Okay.
And just get a sense of how much are people within this particular role and skill set earning globally within your region. I think also just finding HR professionals and having a conversation with them so that you're also not operating in the dark. It would be a very fair, unfair conversation between you and an organization if you're coming in not knowing whether what you're asking for is within or not. I actually have a story.
Tell me, I love stories.
So for my first role ever, so I went to USIU, and I did not have really a formal job through my time. I just spent it doing a lot of weird things. But as I was finishing uni, I then began applying for different roles. And so I interviewed for this role, and I was so excited. And so I spoke to my friends. At that time, they were ready to share salary, salary amounts. And at this time, the person who was earning the most within our group of friends was, I think, at 500 USD. And so we were all so excited that our first role would get us close to that.
Yeah.
And so I interviewed for this role. It was with an international organization. I was so excited to get it, and things were going so well. So I get to the final call, and I take it, and I'm so anxious, and I thought about how much do I want for my salary. So I think I'm going to just ask for 400 USD.
Yeah.
So that I'm not asking for too much. I'm not and this is fine because I'm living with my brother. It'll just be good money for all the things I need to do. So I get on the call, and they're so how much were you thinking about for your next role?
Yeah.
And in a very shaky voice, I say $400. And the guy on the other end was like, oh, okay, thanks for sharing that. For this particular role, we were actually thinking about my amount times like 2x plus.
Oh,
And I was like, why are they giving me so much money?
Damn.
But then like, yes, thank you. I'm like, yeah, that would be okay.
Oh.
So those conversations must be had. I think it's unfortunate that many organizations have it at the end.
Yes,
Because then we could say
there
each
should
other
be
so much
job
time.
ads. Yeah, how much are this? How much are you
Or
paying
let
for
me
this
know
role?
then, like, when we're starting the conversation.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that then we know whether we can like
Let's-
progress or not.
Yeah,
and
let's
I've
not
met
reach-
many interviewers who actually tell you
Yeah,
and check whether this is, a comfortable amount for you. Is this what you're thinking? Is it within like, your band or like whatever you're thinking about? And that makes it easy for where the conversation then goes.
oh nice.
If it's less and you're okay with less, that's also okay.
It's okay,
right?
yeah.
Because it's also not always about salary or like the dollar Kenya shillings amount. Right?
Yeah. Oh, but that's awesome. So did you
Yeah.
take your friends out? Did you tell them how much you're earning now?
So I took all my friends, my brothers, everybody out.
You
Like
took
it
them
was
all
such. I was so excited. But
Hey,
yeah.
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on salary or pay transparency? That any questions I haven't asked?
I think one thing that I've been thinking about is just the fact that the labor market is changing so fast.
Yeah.
And so much
Yeah.
that these conversations must be had.
Must.
At the beginning of COVID, everybody thought their job was going to disappear.
Oh, yeah.
Or like there wouldn't be jobs anymore.
Yeah.
And many companies had to have a lot of difficult conversations. But now, 2 years later, the conversation is different. If anything, your skills are so marketable globally
Yeah.
from Kenya.
Exactly.
And so if I'm trying to like attract you to join our organization, then I need to be thinking about the Wangari at this time, who's
Yeah.
going to be very different 6 months on.
Yes, exactly.
So how do we, have a conversation around pay transparency, around many other aspects, thinking about how the future of work looks,
yeah.
and how do we just like keep ahead of the curve? Because right now I think we are almost finding ourselves at a time where we are very reactive, just
Yes.
because legislation has started happening. What else is coming, and how can we, get ahead of that?
Make those changes.
But also, really, organizations are about people,
Yeah.
and so you
Amen,
have
sister.
to think about the
People. Yeah.
and what they care about.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. There you have it. As Persis has mentioned, salary is like your weight. Anyone who knows you can give you a ballpark. So let's have those conversations. Let's talk about pay transparency, salary transparency. When someone tells you we don't talk about that here, direct them to this episode. And thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe. I'd love to hear your comments. And until next time, kwaheri.